It's common knowledge that the pro-independence movement's cause was thwarted by the relentless tsunami of unionist propaganda in print, TV and radio, with the BBC in particular coming under attack from its critics for alleged bias in its reporting.
Why should a Scottish voter believe you, a politician, against men who are responsible for billions of pounds of profits?
He didn't answer.
It should come as no surprise that the BBC is the UK state broadcaster, with a specific remit to promote cohesion across the nations of the UK. They are, after all, just doing what is expected of them, and therefore the expectation of balance is fatally flawed when the notion of Scottish independence is a clear and present danger to the unity of the United Kingdom. The BBC is funded by annual subscription, which amounts to £320 million from Scottish licence payers alone. It's not unreasonable to assume that at least 50% of that income, £160 million, comes from independence supporting households, amounting to 1,088,435 households underwriting BBC Scotland news reporting, which, in turn, is broadcasting the state message back into their living rooms. By contrast, among the alternative pro-Indy grassroots media, of which Wings Over Scotland generates the largest number of donations, crowd-funded to the tune of around £100,000 per year, that's the equivalent contribution of 680 annual BBC licence fees out of 1,088,435 Indy licence payers, or 0.00063% of £160 million paid to the BBC by independence supporters. Pro-independence Scots are financially supporting unionist media outlets more than media outlets aligned to their own political persuasion, by a phenomenal amount. And this is for the BBC only, as Sky and Virgin TV subscriptions have not been factored in. Are you beginning to see the problem? No one is suggesting that your BBC licence should be cancelled, nor is it being suggested that one breaks the law by watching TV without a valid licence. It is merely being brought to your attention, the hard, cold fact that the funding of a serious alternative news outlet is only possible if similar levels of funding were directed to pro-Indy outlets. There are many people and organisations doing their level best to offer an alternative voice. Different voices with one message that takes issue and rails against the tsunami levels of mainstream media propaganda. Isn't it time to recognise that we have a power to create the media we want to see and hear, if only we make that decision to be the change? Time to get out of that comfort zone. Time for change. And you can start right here. You need only fund those pro-Indy organisations that you feel merit your attention. Please, be the change.
The Scottish referendum campaign showed up the BBC in its worst possible light for everyone in Scotland to see.
You see other people and how upset they are, and it's so tangible, and then you start thinking, well, why is nobody doing anything? How did they just get away with this?
Good Morning Scotland was astonishing. It was incredible, the bias, the repetition. Like almost, almost Nazi propaganda, the hypnotic repetition of negativity.
The BBC gave a Conservative MP over an hour to make a documentary saying that the sense of Scottish nationhood wasn't real, that it was a myth, that it was unjustified.
The Yes campaign started to become, in media terms, Alex Salmond's campaign.
They tore after Alex Salmond, like demonised him and villainised him.
Alex Salmond.
In Scotland, people could see that there was a massive gap between what the BBC was reporting and the truth. People then suddenly realised, wow, maybe they're not actually telling us the truth about anything else.
Nick Robinson.
Why should a Scottish voter believe you, a politician, against men who are responsible for billions of pounds of profits?
He didn't answer.
It was an attempt, a serious and negative attempt at propaganda, which just blew up in the face of the BBC.
All of these predictions about these doom and gloom predictions about Scotland completely ignored what state could actually be created. Maybe all of these doom and gloom scare stories are just big fat lies.
Gavin Essler has this exclusive report.
It's not journalism. It's a peddling of state propaganda, made and paid for by the BBC.
The concept that I had is for a national yes registry where the groups can come together in a self-forming organisation.
Beginning in October through November and into December of 2015, we travelled across the country to as many groups as we could find to ask if there was an appetite to come together.
And once they had decided to take part in the project, which most of the groups did, they chose and voted on 2 delegates to send down to the conference.
So that we have the structure but retaining the balance of the kind of the spirit of the Yes campaign.
From these discussions, we had a better understanding of the needs and problems that had to be met and solved.
Have some kind of structure to all these semi-autonomous groups that have popped up all over Scotland.
And strategies for keeping in contact, swapping ideas.
So that's what we're looking for, is working together to get some sort of reasonable push the way we all want to go, but consolidated so that the sum of the elements is greater than all the individual elements just added together.
But most of all, there's this coordinated action across a broad base throughout the country.
How do you create a mechanism to do this? What shape would a forum mechanism need to be? It would require a lot of consideration to design and build a solution. 20 vanguard groups decided to sponsor us for 6 months to do just that. Of all the functions it had to perform while maintaining the guiding principle of local autonomy, the design had to be simple enough so that all members of our grassroots could pick it up and use it. If a 9-year-old can understand it, it might just work. After a lot of deliberation and a successful crowdfund to begin to pay for it, the mechanism began to take shape. On the 18th of September 2016, 2 years after the referendum and 8 months after the conference, Indy App 1.0 was released. Stage 1 of 4 to create the mechanism. The final stage of the app is under construction and we are raising funds for this through a crowdfund just now. The completed app will have 3 key elements. The forums, a place for ideas to be proposed and endorsed. The committee rooms, a place where those ideas can be honed and turned into practical campaigns. And 3, resource buttons, to gather what is needed to put those campaigns into action, locally, regionally, and nationally.
We need, before the next referendum, to be fully equipped
to be able to speak to each other.
And work on ideas together with other groups, which I think is going to be really important.
We can take on the fight the way that we see fit for our area. We can tackle local issues, how independence would affect your local area, as well as how it would affect the full country.
Trying to organise a Greater Glasgow group or something, you know, to get the idea of getting information from national groups.
It could go on onto the resource button and just be there as a tool for groups to use.
We always contacted all our members by email, which has its own difficulties because they're not really able to talk to each other. So for one thing, if we get all our members, all our active members onto the Indy app, we'll be able to help them to be able to talk to each other and feed ideas back to each other, because we'll all be able to communicate with one another, which isn't possible when you just have an email list.
Before it is complete, we will be holding 5 regional meetings across the country, and as soon as the groups are ready on the app, a national convention can be held by the entire network. 125 local groups and growing.
But most of all, there's this coordinated action across a broad base throughout the country, which starts to be so well organised that those in power have to pay attention. We can start to influence the debate rather than contribute their messages from the sidelines. That's what I would be hoping.
The date of the tea break. And beyond.
15 minutes each.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening and welcome to Yes, East Kilbride. There's a couple of people still coming in. We're just about full. Once everybody's sat, we will start. So thank you for turning up. First of all, really pleased that we've got such a turnout on a rather unusual weather night for East Kilbride. I'd said to Hardeep on the way here, you know, we're trying to ditch the snow for you, Hardeep, and thankfully it worked. Are you happy with that?
I'm always happy to be in East Kilbride.
Brilliant.
That's a lie. I work for the BBC. I expect it's a lie.
That's right. Comes with the territory. So, first of all, I would say that we have got 4 people who by virtue of what they do for a living, are perhaps uncharacteristically likely to shout about their political beliefs. However, in 2014, a whole host of people decided that despite the potential impact to their occupation, they would come out and say that they were voting yes. And just to remind anybody who's on Livestream, voting yes and being an independent country, and I'm sure this will get a cheer, is entirely normal.
Now we're saying 18 verses of Caledonia.
That's right. So the normal state of affairs for any country is self-determination, and the four people here tonight I want to introduce you to, they have got that belief. And I've taken some notes tonight, most of it from BBC website, so it's probably true. What do you, I don't know. Some of it from Wikipedia and some of it from speaking to people. So here we have, on my left, Lin Anderson. Lin, if you don't know, is a very well-known crime writer, screenwriter, and co-founder of something called Bloody Scotland Festival. And we've actually got a well-known writer in the audience tonight, Alex Harris over on the left, and I'm sure you want to meet. I'm sure you're a well-known screenwriter. Writer, my apologies. On my other left, we have Hardeep, well-known, of course, for, well, I'm going to read it out, Hardeep, are you okay with that? Presenter, actor, chef, comedian, director, and believe it or not, a BAFTA award winner on It'll Never Work some time ago.
It's another BAFTA as well, but I'm not going to hang on.
All right, okay, no, don't talk about it.
Self-effacing as a nation.
To my right, we've got Patrick Rolink. I've known Patrick for many years now. Patrick's a professional comedian. He's a board member of Spirit Aid with David Heyman. Patrick is what I would call a real true socialist who lives and breathes it every single day. And of course, like everybody here, he's a yes supporter. And finally on my right, moving the sweeties away. Libby McArthur. Libby, of course, is an actor, director, teacher. She's in River City, Taggart, Take the High Road, Ramsey Nisbet, Looking After Jojo. But I also found out something else. She was also in a band in the 1980s called The Sophisticated Boom Boom.
And we used to hang about East Kilbride.
Good. And what I've been told by Libby, and I don't know if this is true, is that she's prepared to give a rendition of one of the songs tonight. So we're kind of looking forward to that. Just to talk you through the format, first of all, Hardeep's got a kind of tight time schedule today, I think. He's got something on radio that he's working on, so we were going to start a different way, but we're going to start off with Hardeep. Each speaker's got 15 minutes, and I think what they're going to say is that they are voting yes, the rationale for voting yes, despite their occupation, and the potential impact on their income. And we're going to then take, after each person's spoken, we'll take a refreshment break, tea, coffee, etc., cakes, fantastic cakes from the East Kilbride catering team up the left. And at the end of that, we're going to do a Q&A, so before you go for the tea break, you come up here and take a bingo ticket, and it's so there's no favouritism. We're just going to shout out a number, and you can ask a question. And that's it. So we're going to kick off, give a big round of applause for Hardeep Singh Kohli.
Is that okay? It's always lovely to be in multicultural East Kilbride. No, there would have been more brown people here, but we couldn't get the insurance for it. And of course, she's in the fucking kitchen. It does seem curious to me that we need to make an argument for being a nation, because to me the smallest unitary part of political governance is a nation. And it was interesting, given my background, some of you may not be aware, because obviously I'm not from around here, I'm from Bishopbriggs, and we do things very differently in the north. I found it most curious that anyone of Indian heritage, be it from Bangladesh, Pakistan or India, like myself, didn't vote for independence. I found that hugely confusing. You know, because if it was good enough for our forebears, surely it's good enough for us. And I mean, you know, John very kindly talks of the perceived bravery of putting your head above a parapet and standing up for what you believe. But we pale into insignificance when compared to the Red Clydesiders that took to the streets during the First World War, having their own nation's guns trained on them. as they stood up for what they believed. Folk, you know, sure, I took a hit in salary. I moved back to Scotland because I kept getting told to pipe down on Twitter because I lived in London. So I came home. Right enough, I didn't come straight to Glasgow because I left Glasgow once. I didn't want to have to leave twice, so I went to live in Edinburgh. Also, I missed English people, so it's lovely to be in Edinburgh, surrounded by them. You know, the only city in the world where you can stand in one place and see a castle, a volcano, the sea, and organised street mugging, cracking place. Beautiful castle, no fucking chat. What can you do? And I think that's what I couldn't continue to live in Edinburgh. Lynn and I were just remembering I worked on bloody Scotland quite soon after the referendum result, and surrounded by folk that wanted to restore the nation of Scotland. And that's the reason I left Edinburgh. I couldn't look anyone in the eye. The only capital city in the history of the modern world that, without a bullet being fired and a drop of blood being spilt, voted against its independence. You know, we are always going to have that constituency amongst us that can see beyond the end of their nose, that haven't been taught their history. When I was asked by The Independent on Sunday 10 years ago, at Burns' one of the anniversaries of the Bard, to write a piece about Shakespeare or Burns. I'm like, are you joking? Why? You know, it's like asking ice cream or chocolate. You can have both. But they're forever wanting to create division. I've got nothing against the English. Some of my best friends know English people, and they tell me they're fine. The one thing I've seen since devolution has been, I mean, for anyone that goes to any folk music bar in Glasgow or in Edinburgh, is how young the folk are playing the folk music. You know, and hopefully what we need to do is, Burns is another great example. I mean, how many folk learn more than 1 or 2 bits of Burns at school? When you go to Russia, Canada have got a national holiday for him. In Indy, he's celebrated in Bengal. South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, the same. What is it about us that we seem unable to capture the brilliance of a man like that? One of the earliest he's believed to be the earliest feminist. I don't know if you noticed, I used to be on Question Time, and I used to be on Any Questions on the wireless till my political allegiance became clear. And it does strike me as quite curious that unionists can have a marvellous career in broadcasting, because apparently that's not biased. It's not biased for them to sit and tell us that we're too wee and we're too stupid to govern ourselves. But anyone that might think differently, I mean, you know, I lost a lot of work. Still don't get the odd television gig. I was actually, it's a true story that mustn't leave this room. Oh, if you insist, tell folk. I was with the commissioning editor from Radio Scotland, having a beer. Now you need to understand, most of my work in radio and telly has been live. I do live current affairs stuff. And he took a call and he said, hold on, this is important. Louise White had called in sick the next day, and he said, listen, I'm going to have to go. I need to find a replacement. I said, you're taking the piss, aren't you? And he said, no, I've got to find a replacement. I said, and I'm cheap, because I'm an immigrant. Okay, funnier in my head than out loud. But he looked straight back at me and he goes, well, you know I can't use you. You know about the email. And I said, what email? He goes, well, you know that your name appears with other names of people we can't have news output at BBC Scotland. Now I thought the BBC was about balance. Well, it's been difficult for me, and difficult in a kind of middle class way, in that you have to have a chocolate croissant when there's no almond croissants way. So let's be clear, it's that sort of level of difficulty. It's having to continue to work for the BBC as it's transmuted into a state broadcaster. The clue's in the title. British Broadcasting Corporation. As it stands, we raise 10% of the revenue for the BBC in Scotland and get less than 5% of the programmes. And a lot of that 5% is flown in, plaque-driven. You know, for one of the most creative countries in the world, we should be all over the BBC. We should be disproportionately representing the BBC. And also, I don't know about you, but I said to a pal of mine who was going down to London, and I'll finish with this because I've probably talked too much, as usual. One thing I never understood when I was living in London was quite how many folk are on the plane and the train down south. And I said to a pal of mine who was travelling down with me, I said, I spend a third of my time in London, a third of my time in Denison, and a third of my time on Virgin trains. And she said, aye, right. And I got on the train, and the clippy says, all right, Hardeep. Maybe it's my age. Maybe it's the fact that I'm blessed to come from this country. But I would, and I'm afraid this is unnecessarily emotional and unnecessarily evocative, but I've come from a family where we went to war in other nations, and my great-grandparents didn't fight for Britain so that our voices could not be heard. I had two great-grandfathers that fought in the Indian British Army, so no one will tell me how to think about my country. Enough's enough. I would rather sleep on somebody's couch than continue to be part of this facade that they call the union. And just ask yourselves, we all know this. We wouldn't join this union now if it was offered to us. I would rather die on my feet than live on my knees, because I'd be surrounded by the best of people. So I couldn't give a fuck about not getting work. I could give a fuck about 250,000 Waynes in Glasgow going to bed hungry.
Yep.
I could give a fuck about not getting another BAFTA. Two's enough. He missed one. I felt compelled to correct him. And ultimately, I'm Navi's brother, and that's got to count for something. Sir Alba, thank you very much. Sorry I've got to run.
Thank you very much, Hardeep. And, well, what can you say? That man has just stood up and talked to us. Cheers again. Thank you very much. So next up we have Lin Anderson, and of course Lin is going to talk to us about, well, I hope you're going to mention bloody Scotland and talk a bit about that. So if you wouldn't mind giving a warm welcome to Lin Anderson.
Just before I set out, Stuart McBride. Does anybody here read Stuart McBride, the crime writer? So, yeah, he has a big legion of fans. He noticed what I was doing tonight, and he sent me a direct message to say that he spent his first 2 years in East Kilbride, and could I please leave it the way I found it? So I said I'd do my best. Anyway, my name's Lin Anderson. I was born and brought up in Greenock, so I'm a West Coaster. My father was a policeman. You might have guessed that from my height. He had three daughters, all my height. I was detective inspector in Greenock Police Force. It was very difficult to be a policeman's daughter in Greenock, because Greenock folk, the west of Scotland, are not particularly tall. So his three daughters stood out like sore thumbs. Plus, we were known as Big Willie Mitchell's daughters, so we didn't get away with very much. I was a teacher for many, many years. I went to Glasgow University, met my husband there, who was a civil engineer. My father moved his family to Carbridge when he retired from the police force. That became our home village. For those who don't know where that is, it's just north of Aviemore, in the ski country. By then I was at Glasgow University. The interesting thing about the Carbridge move was my father moved to Carbridge and suddenly became the most avid SNP supporter I've ever met, learned to speak Gaelic, and really changed his entire view of how Scotland was run. For many people, if you go and live in the Highlands and you realise the power of the estates in the Highlands of Scotland is just astonishing. The estate Carbridge is on. One little story from before the referendum, in the lead up to the referendum. Up in Carbridge, in the street I live, we have a barbecue in the summer. And at the barbecue, in the lead up to the referendum, that would be in August, before 2014 referendum, we're all sitting around talking. It was pretty obvious by the people that they were all planning to vote yes, but we were given the information that the workers on that estate had basically been threatened and told that they were on no account to vote yes because they would lose their jobs. Pretty shocking, but there wasn't anything any of us could do about it. Although the Valley is a very strong supporters, Inverness was. Big problems, of course. A lot of the fields had the huge signs up, the Better Together signs, because they were part of the estates, which were definitely on the other side. Anyway, I now sort of live between my home village and Edinburgh, depending on what I'm doing in the way of working. And I moved into crime fiction in 2003 from being a full-time teacher. Everybody thinks I taught English. I taught mathematics and computer science for the last 17 years. You see, that was my good Scottish breadth of education there. First crime book came out in 2003. And I've been writing a series featuring a Scottish female forensic scientist who was in fact inspired by a pupil of mine at Granton Grammar School when I taught there, which isn't that far from Carbridge. However, the whole business of Scottish crime writing is really a phenomenon, but it has been for some time, but not fully recognised. And a friend and I were down in England at yet another sort of crime festivals, Crime Writers Association event. And we were looking at one another and thinking, why are we always down in England at crime writing events when we actually have, at that time, Ian Rankin was the biggest crime writer in the UK. With multiple others, like Val McDermott, who's a big Yes supporter. And we thought, why is this? Why must we come down here to Harrogate and to Bristol, when in fact, proportionally, we have more crime writers with a population of 5 million people, which are internationally known. And I think this is important to say because we forget how well known we are worldwide. So my friend Alex Gray and I thought about this, and we came up with what we thought was a brilliant idea, that we would hold a festival in Scotland. Instead of us going elsewhere, we would bring people to Scotland. We would show what Scotland could do in the world stage with crime writing. And you know, it's a funny thing with a good idea. When you say it to people, you can see their eyes light up, and they always think, why the hell did we not think about this before? It was 3.5 years in the planning, and when it was launched 7 years ago, so that's 10.5 years since the idea came up. When it was launched 7 years ago in Stirling, Ian Rankin said, Scandinavia doesn't have better crime writers than Scotland. It has better PR. And I think a lot of what we do is about the PR for Scotland. And I like to think when we work with Bloody Scotland, and people come from all over the world, we have a contingent from America every year, Europeans come to Bloody Scotland. For those that are not aware of it, it takes place mid-September in Stirling. It was my friend Alex Gray that came up with the title, Bloody Scotland. And of course, in the perfect location, Stirling. You couldn't get a better location. Why did we choose that? Because we wanted it to be something that really, a place that represented Scotland, a kind of magical place, so when people come from abroad and from other parts of Scotland, what they will do is they will have the chance to go and see a bit more of Scotland, because it's on the sort of Highland fault line. You're looking at the Highlands. And of course, you've got the Wallace Monument, you've got the Stirling Castle, you've got It fits perfectly the whole idea of Bloody Scotland with the history as well as the crime writing. So 7 years later, we're still going strong. And I think from my own experience of the people I work with in Bloody Scotland and the crime writers the Scottish crime writers who support Bloody Scotland, there is a huge feeling of yes among them. How does that affect us? Well, I don't know, you'd probably be aware that Val McDermott moved back to Scotland. She lives in Edinburgh now, and as well as having her football team. She moved here so she could vote properly in the referendum, and she went on a number of programmes. I don't know if any of you saw her, and when asked why she would vote yes, her reply fits mine pretty well. She looked at what the Scottish Government was doing and what they planned to do, and it seemed to her that that was what she wanted to happen for Scotland. And I go along with that. It's hard to, in the year 2000, I saw this advert in the paper for a Millennium Burns Supper. And I thought, oh, I quite fancy going to that. And it was held in a big, I've forgotten the actual location, in Queen Street in Edinburgh. And my husband and I bought tickets and we went along. Now, remember, this was the millennium, January of the year 2000. And when we got there, we suddenly realised that actually it wasn't really a Burns supper. What it was a dinner in aid of the SNP, which was fine. But even more important, I think, for what we're talking about tonight here, is that it was also a place where people in the media and the arts and the literature of Scotland had decided that they could come out as supporting an independent Scotland. Now, it's hard for us to sort of think back to that, but it was remarkable. Elaine C. Smith was there, and they had cooked up this idea in her kitchen, I believe, where they had decided, Alistair Gray was there, you know, a lot of the people that you know from the arts in Scotland, and each one of them got up on the stage, and that was a difficult thing to do back then, to actually come out and say, because they knew that if they did it, the likelihood would be that they would be losing a lot of work. So it was incredibly brave. Now, after that happened, I mean, it was an amazing night, and it sort of changed my whole perception, really. And shortly after that, I had spoken, in the lead up, really, to the referendum. I don't know if there's a Scottish crime writer called Sarah Sheridan, who writes historical crime fiction. She also runs a fabulous perfume company that makes perfumes with fabulous Scottish names for women's perfumes. But I was walking along the road with her in Edinburgh, and I talked about this Burns supper in the year 2000. And she was like many people in Scotland. She thought, oh no, that can't be right. You know, people don't not get a job because they say they're supporting independence. I said, those people stood up and said that, you know, and she sort of thought, and you could see her thinking, like, what happens to people? Oh no, that can't be right. The BBC wouldn't do this. You know, no. You know, that's not the sort of country we live in. And then away she went, and she did all her, being a historian, she just set about finding out what she needed to know. And then she phoned me up, she said, I've totally changed my mind. Now, you would have seen her in 2014 out there doing this stuff. We had, it was very difficult to do Bloody Scotland in 2014 because it was the day after the vote. Yep. We opened on the Friday following that vote. We had people coming from all over the country. We had people coming from America and from Europe. Bearing in mind, those people would think we would vote yes. They couldn't imagine us voting no, right? And we had to turn up there, you know, up all night listening to these sort of, it was terrible. But of course, we're professional, we do the jobs, we all arrive in, you know, in the office. There's a lot of hugging going on, but, you know, it's now bloody Scotland time. And Hardeep was booked in for the Friday night at the Albert Hall, filled the Albert Hall. It was absolutely, it was fantastic. It was very funny. It was a kind of quiz thing. So he got the thing going, 700 people, no bother. But probably the most significant event of that weekend in 2014 was the one with Willie McIlvanney. I don't know, do you know Willie? Oh, a hero of mine. I think a hero of the devolution debate. And Willie was devastated by the vote, totally devastated by it. And I had said to him, oh, you know, we'll get another shot. And he said, we will, but I'll not be here. I'll not be here for it. But we had a debate, which Ian McArthur chaired. And Willie was one of the panellists. And it was very interesting. It was at the big Albert Hall again, 700 people in there. And Ian McArthur asked the audience how many people thought that the BBC had been biased in their coverage of the referendum. And 3/4 of the hands in that hall went up. It was, of course, the last time that Willie could really contribute into this debate, but I have to say that I don't know if any of you saw him in action during devolution debate when they took the lorry, the bus around Scotland, and he would give speeches. And the thing that I'm reminded of when I think about Willie, apart from the fact he was such a lovely man and this fabulous voice, wonderful writer, and is really the grandfather of Tart Noir. His Laidlaw, if you've never read Laidlaw, please go and read it. It's the best book, the best Scottish crime book out there. But he said from the top of that bus, Scotland is a mongrel nation, and it's something we should be proud about. And so I always think about that when I think about Willie. Do I worry that somehow I won't be able to write books or sell books because I've come out, and anybody who follows my Twitter feed will know what I believe in? But it's interesting, I think I've got about 10,500 followers on my Twitter feed, but people rarely block me or decide not to follow me, even although I have a very strong, you know, I do tweet a lot of things I feel strongly about Scotland being an independent country and why it should be an independent country. But I love it because I tweet all these fabulous photographs. I mean, my books are set all over Scotland because I've lived in lots of different places. It's a wonderful way to engage with people, not just about my books, but about life in general in Scotland. And I think when people look at a Twitter feed that is not put Scotland as a normal, as he said, independence for a country as being normal, it starts to seep into people's consciousness. I mean, it's in all ours. We just have to make sure it's in the consciousness of others as well. Thank you. Thank you.
That was absolutely fantastic, Lynn, and I think anybody who can, keep an eye on Lynn's Twitter feed. It's Lin_Anderson, and you'll maybe get some information about the Bloody Scotland event that comes up in September. We're just sorting the sound there. Thanks for that, Paul. Just before we move on, a confirmation that we are indeed live with Independence Live, and I want to give these guys a special shout out because they have literally attended, and I don't know how many, I'm sure Kevin's kept a note, I would say hundreds of events, and they just do it voluntarily. These guys don't get paid how many thousands? So, and so you'll notice there's a small, maybe slightly bigger actually, green bucket And our aim tonight, if we can manage it, is to fill the bucket. So Kevin was saying that every other Yes event he goes to, the bucket gets filled. So we're going to try that tonight, so just go for it. Okay. Yes, that's right. So just before we move on, Independence Live, of course, are filming us. Keep an eye on things that are going on. Currently there are some adverts going out as well, talking about the All Under One banner event on the 5th of May. Keep an eye on that. And other events that Independence Live are filming. We're now going to move on to Patrick Rolink. And I've already introduced you to Patrick and told you a bit about him. But Patrick, I think, is not going to use a microphone. Or is he? Yes, he's going to use a microphone. So please give a warm welcome to Patrick Rolink.
Thanks. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to be here. It's great to see a number of faces of people who I know every day trying to affect change in their community. And for me, that is what Yes is all about. Knowledge is an incredible thing. And for 15 years, I've been a volunteer with a charity called Spirit Aid. People at Libby have done great amounts to help us. And people say to me, why are you still doing Spirit Aid? For the simple reason, I can't walk away. There's people who wouldn't eat tomorrow in parts of the world if we didn't do what we do with Spirit Aid. And we can only do that with the support of the people of Scotland. And for me, independence is exactly the same situation. I have first-hand knowledge of the poverty that so many of our fellow citizens are living in every day in this country. Real poverty where people can hardly feed their families, where people can hardly clothe their families, when people are doing crowdfunders to bury their own dead. We live in a country divided by one thing, poverty. And it's unacceptable. And it doesn't have to be that way. I used to be real interested in politics. I worked for an MP for 6 months. I worked in Westminster, and I quickly realised I was wasting my time in politics because politicians are totally unaware of what is happening day in and day out in our communities. There may be the odd exception, but the general rule of thumb is they don't even read their own emails. They're given a memo every morning from the party in Westminster. These are the questions that you can ask today. These are the subjects you can speak on. And these are the vote of thanks that you can make today in Westminster. It's totally wrong. There's a real lack of representation for people in Scotland who really are suffering day in and day out. I would just ask any of you to go and sit outside any primary school in Scotland on a winter's day and watch the way the children go in there, not even dressed properly for the winter conditions. And here we are living in what is supposedly one of the richest countries in the world. And we have got to a situation now where many of us in our country are accepting that. And that's what I find worrying. All around us, we just have to look at the poverty of opportunity for our young people. It's frightening. We're sending people to university. They're getting fantastic degrees. They're empowering themselves. They're coming out of university, there's no jobs, and we're saying, work in a call centre, you'll get no benefits. We really need to move things around our country. I've been to loads of PR exercises, HR exercises, and people stand up and go, hey, I'm from America, your biggest asset as a company is your people. Scotland's biggest asset is its people. And our people are being let down by the Westminster government. I've got some concerns. I've got concerns that our young people, when I was 18, 19, 20, I was out getting lifted, out in protest marches, fighting for a better country. I joined the Labour Party when I was 14, right? We learned to live with our mistakes. But I joined the Labour at 14 because from an early age, I could see, I live in a housing scheme there to call Thrashbush, and I still live there. And it was poor when I was wee, and it's still poor now. All that oil's flowed through the hands of the rich, and they haven't even bent down and touched the poor in our country. The lack of facilities for young people to go on and fulfil their potential in this country is holding Scotland back. It's holding them back. And the only way we're ever going to change that is by standing up and being an independent country. I was appalled at the number of people who voted no for various reasons. I've got friends who are Catholics who said, I can't vote because in an independent Scotland, I will be discriminated against. I find that shocking. I said, you're discriminated against now. You're not going to live long enough to get your old age pension. Our mortality rate's so low, most people won't live to get their pension. Personally, just now, I'll be 106 before I'm able to retire, and the chances of me getting 106 are not pretty good. But the whole system is geared towards dividing people. We've now live in a country where the poor blame the poor for being poor, whilst those culpable sit at the feasting table enjoying the spoils of all our labour, and we refuse to take that head on. I'm really surprised that now we've got our own parliament, we still place so much dependence on Westminster. I totally understand why the SNP mitigate things like the bedroom tax, but let's not just mitigate it, let's attack it. Let's get more full frontal in taking on Westminster and outing them for the utter attacks they're making on ordinary people who get up every morning, go out to work and just try and get by, because that's the type of country we live in now. People are now struggling to get by, and politicians, from my point of view, you may differ, for me, our politicians aren't fighting hard enough for change, right across all the political parties. I'm absolutely disappointed at the SNP MPs in Westminster, who, when they applauded a fabulous speech, are cowed down to Westminster, and yet it's happened so many times since and nothing's happened. We should be in there challenging these people day in and day out. There is no constitution in Britain. It's conventions, and we want to change the conventions. It's almost a convention now that Scotland will be divided by poverty. Let's change those conventions. Let's take the fight to Westminster. Let's highlight all the real deficiencies in our communities. Scotland's a fantastic country. Holyrood's a fantastic concept, but it's only one step towards us fulfilling our potential as a nation and as people. I've got a wee 2.5-year-old granddaughter called Melody, and it's sensational being a grandpa. If that's me, tell them I'm busy. It's absolutely sensational being a granddad, but you've no idea that the worry that now causes me. I'm now thinking, what am I leaving behind for Melody? What sort of world is Melody going to grow up into? Is Melody going to get more opportunities than I did when I was younger? Is Melody going to get more opportunities than my 2 daughters did? And so the answer to that is down to us. It won't change. 1970s we had the paper, Born to Fail, when it talked about people being born in poverty and how they would never succeed. Nothing's changed in all that time. And I believe the reason it hasn't changed is because we haven't been radical enough. We haven't been radical enough. And I'm not talking about burning things and breaking things and shouting and bawling. I'm talking about having those conversations every day with people and saying, are you happy about what's happening in your community? Are you happy that our young people have got nowhere to go at night? They've got nothing to do. They've got no outlet for all their fantastic skills, for all their energy. There's nothing for them. Are you happy that our old age pensioners who have worked all their life can't put their heating on in the winter? Are you happy with these things? Because if you are, keep on voting for Westminster. If you're not, it's time for radical change. We need to win people over. And we won't do it by going on Facebook and attacking everybody who doesn't agree with us. I'm appalled at the comments made about Billy Connolly. Why attack someone? Win them over. Bring them round to our side. We have the moral high ground. We have the reasonable argument. We have the evidence to show that Westminster does not work. I don't know if it was Einstein who said it's madness to repeat the same thing over and over again. Westminster is madness. But we need to show people that. The BBC will not tell anyone. The other night when that vile creature Esther McVey made those horrible comments about rape victims, the BBC didn't even show the interview, but STV did. So we can't trust the media. We need to trust ourselves. We can't trust political parties. We need to hold them accountable. We need more scrutiny of our politicians. We need to make sure that they deliver. And if they don't, we don't vote for them next time round. I swing between moods when it comes to the independence campaign. It's the most important thing in my life. I don't do a gig without mentioning it. It's so important to me for my wee darling Melody and for my 2 beautiful daughters So important that they live in a better country. My wife's name is Svetlana Anatolyevna Vinogradova. She's from Moscow. She voted yes, and she can't believe why anyone else didn't. And neither can I. But I don't need to get angry about it. I don't need to get bitter about it. I don't need to start blaming people. What I need to do is have the conversations I have every day with people and say, here, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? That's the way we'll move this forward, not trusting politicians to deliver for us. This is a movement that the people have to start and the people have to finish by winning the yes vote. It's really, really simple. A couple of days ago, I was out at a nursery school in Airdrie on behalf of Spirit Aid with 3 students from the University of Strathclyde, and we bought the children raincoats so they could go and see winter habitat and that type of thing. Now, what's significant about that for me is not the fact that Spirit Aid raised the money and we found the source. It was the fact that we've got 3 young people at university who are so passionate about making a difference in their community and going out and raising money to effect real change for these children. All that potential sitting there waiting to be harvested, and it's up to us to reach out to these people. The Yes movement needs to be far more inclusive than it is just now. There are too many squabbles. There are too many people frightened to make a post in case they get attacked. If you don't disagree with someone, say, I understand what you're saying, however, this is another way of looking at it. We need to win this vote. It's a vote of necessity. It's a vote of necessity. We don't have any choice. If we want our country to prosper, if we want our young people to have a future, every one of us need to be the foot soldiers. Don't sit and wait on Nicola saying something, or George saying something, or Betty saying something. People don't listen to them. You must have realised that by now. Most people don't even vote most of the time, but they listen to their neighbours, they listen to their friends, they listen to their workmates, and they listen to their colleagues. So if nothing else out of tonight comes, go into work tomorrow, or go wherever you go tomorrow and have a wee word with somebody and say, here, have you had a wee thought about this? My neighbour's from Yorkshire, right? Now, there's a big advantage to living next door to someone from Yorkshire, right? I was able to burn all my encyclopedias because he knows everything, right? And he said to me, I voted no for my pension. And I says, hang on a minute, George. Your pension pot doesn't exist. It was spent decades ago. Your income tax was spent. Your VAT has been spent. Your national insurance has been spent. Your tax due in your car's been spent. Your air duty in your holidays been spent. The tax on your insurance has been spent. It's all been spent, and we're still £1.8 trillion in debt, and you're telling me you're voting for more of the same? Those are the arguments we need to take to people. We need to show people how our pensioners are impoverished by the pensions we have in this country. Well, 1% of the country's living in the lap of luxury and so much money that they'll never be able to spend of it because we don't have a fair taxation system. We don't prosecute people who don't pay their taxes unless it's the wee guy who runs his own business, fitting pipes and being a plumber, that type of thing. It's a grossly unfair country, and we all need to do more. And none of you can walk away from this. None of you can take a huff and say, that's me, I'm finished because I fell out with so-and-so. You all know the consequences of the last no vote. And if we don't get a yes vote next time round, you all know what the consequences are going to be for the people of Scotland. So people are depending on us, just like people depend on Spirit Aid. Sometimes it's hard to convince them that they need to join our fight and they need to be on our side, because what we're doing to them is holding out a hand to take them the right way forward. But next time you're on Facebook, next time you're on Twitter or Instagram or any of these things all the young people are using these days, next time you're in any social media, remember that you have a responsibility, because you have the knowledge and you've been empowered with that knowledge to know that we need real change to affect the people in Scotland reaching their potential, and people like our pensioners who have worked hard having a deserved retirement and getting what they deserve to be able to enjoy their life at the end of the day. It swings both ways, our young people, our elderly people. So I'm going to finish off now because I could talk all night. But do you know the most important thing about me for the Yes campaign? Was see the fabulous people I met. I've made friends who'll be friends of mine for life now through the Yes campaign, and there's some of them in here tonight. And do you know what? We were all driven by the same thing. Not by money or an extra 500 quid a week or 500 quid a year or this or that. We were all driven by one thing, fairness. We want a fairer Scotland. We want a Scotland that's got equality for every one of our citizens, no matter their situation, no matter who they are or what they are. Everyone in Scotland deserves the same respect, the same treatment and the same opportunities. And we all need to remember that when we're on social media. We need to respect other people's views. And if we do that and counter them with the arguments that we have to back up the proposal we have for a fairer Scotland, an independent Scotland, where every citizen will benefit, we'll win that argument. Thank you.
I'm sure you'll agree that was fantastic, definitely from the heart. I've seen Patrick speaking many times, and I think he's right. If you go to certain areas of Scotland, why haven't they changed in 40, 50 years? It's down to us. Okay, our final speaker of the evening, and everybody's met Libby, who's on this table, and absolutely, if you don't mind me saying, a wonderful and warm human being. And she's even typed up her own script. So if you...
I'll not read much yet,
hopefully.
in case I get lost.
So if you wouldn't mind, a very warm welcome to Libby McArthur.
Thank you, darling. I was getting carried away there, thought I was still in the band. Just do my mic. Well, what they said, basically, it does feel as if I'm glad I'm last, because it really is like the journey that came from Hardeep through Lin and Patrick. It's hard to add anything to it except, you know, for my bit. So it was exciting when John said come here, because I do remember how it felt during that time leading up to the yes vote, and how exciting it was, because we went to meetings and we all got together and we all talked, and Patrick and I did a few together, and then came the result, and it just was devastating. It was just but since then I've just thought, right, you know, practical and all that, and what sense can I make of this, and how can I most efficaciously turn things around? So I'm actually feeling very optimistic. Most of my friends and family, maybe it just decides who you hang about with, but just about all my friends and family now feel that it's, you know, you'd have to be deaf, dumb and blind not to be a yes supporter. But during that time I had yes, no dinner parties. I don't know who I could invite to a yes, no dinner party that would vote no nowadays. So things have changed, you know. The ones that were no of now, they're so ashamed. I met a wee woman in a red coat in Tesco's on the day of the vote, and she was a really lovely wee woman, the kind of person that should have been on the India keyring. And she saw me getting champagne in. When I say champagne, I mean cava, but anyway. So she saw me putting bottles like that, and she said, "Oh, is that for the referendum result?" And I said, "Aye, all my pals are coming. The house is going to be team-handed tonight." And she said, "Oh, I hope yes win. I hope yes win." I said, "Me too." And as she turned away, she went, "I'll be voting no." Anyway, it was her that made me think about what I was going to say tonight, because if that wee woman's still out there, then I wish she was here tonight, because these are the people we need to speak to. So when I think about her, I think about how the conversation started, and she was like, "Oh, are you Hardeep?" And I had to tell her, "No, I'm no in Rivers City anymore," which John hasn't noticed. But that's fine, John, so don't watch it, because it's all going to eat the dogs, it's all a bit. But that's celebrity stuff, you know, kind of like, you know, celebrities for yes. I was laughing when Hardeep started, and then Lin and Patrick, because I've not worked for ages, so now that explains it. The reason I'm not getting any work is because I'm here. And I'm here on my Twitter feed, and I'm here on my Facebook page, and I'm here on my... See, I just thought I was shit. Here all along I'm actually brilliant, just in the I'm politically motivated place. Oh, somebody wants to come in, let them in. So I was thinking about the word celebrity, and I was thinking it's one of my C words. because I find it really difficult. Wayne's come up to me in the school and they say, I want to be famous, and I go, what for? And they go, for the money. And I go, no, for doing what? Famous for what? And what I realise is they don't want fame and fortune. They just want to have their chance to do what they can do and be recognised and feel that there's a bit of security. And what Patrick was saying today, the way things are going, Wayne's only going to have, forget fame and fortune, they're not going to have the safety and the security, do the thing that makes their heart singing. And so, you know, when I think about the C word, I think about celebrity versus creativity. And I did a big workshop for Wayne's once, who I wanted to be famous, talking about different C words, because under celebrity, which is to do with inequality and divide, then the C words were things like, I say it as our Willie with the angel and the devil in his forehead, you know. So for me, the devil's the celebrity, and it's all childishness and competition and cynicism and conditional criticism and complacency, which sums up a no voter, if ever I've heard one. And for me, the creativity is, you know, it's about cooperation and connectedness and communication and curiosity and stuff. And basically, one of the things that pulled me towards Yes, and indeed joining the SNP party, was about the idea of togetherness, better together, and the real finished off thinking sense of it, and the real kind of what Patrick talked about, what Lynn talked about, that stuff of, if we don't start looking after each other, then we are truly. And it's that thing of getting real now. I mean, one of the exciting things that's happening for me is you can really see how scared the established union guys are. Have we noticed how British the telly's got, you know? I mean, it's funny, you know, I said to my son the other day, look at that telly page, it's like a joke. You know, it's like, oh, the soldiers, and I mean, not that I'm getting against soldiers, but, you know, it's the royal family, and Jeremy Vile today, it was all about the Queen's Corgi. You know what I mean? It's like, it's the British Bake Off, and then we'll have a Cromwell film, and then we'll have a Churchill film, and then we'll do the Queen again, and then we'll do the other Queen, and you know, they're obviously terrified. You know, we're up to something and it's working, because it's become a kind of joke, the BBC. I spoke to an editor the other day, and he worked for the BBC for 35 years. He says, we used to stand in the pub and go, I work at the Beeb. He said, now I'm sorry? No, he said, you know, we're cringing at the idea. So, just to put you in the picture about my journey, I mean, my upbringing, the phrase "we're all Jock Tamson's bairns" was threaded through it like the yellow line through the tartan, the MacArthur tartan. You know, my mammy was basically saying folk are good and don't you get above yourself and we're all the same. So my family were all teachers and nurses, and my dad was a fireman, and he was an absolute staunch Labour Party supporter, you know, big socialists. So nobody in my family were SNP. Nobody, you know, it was just seen to be kind of rich Tories. That was the perceived wisdom as far as I was concerned. So what happened in that journey is I finished off my thinking, basically, because up until then it had just been conditioning. And that's one of the C's I want to talk about, the wee lady and the lady in the red coat. She was suffering from conditioning. And we're all suffering from conditioning. And it takes many forms, you know. And I think we're conditioned to accept the unacceptable, to accept the democratic deficit. People spat out by our system on the streets to live there at an alarming rate. And it takes a long while before you see that many homeless people in the street. You know, things have gone wrong all the way down the line, and eventually somebody's sleeping in the street, you know. But it didn't start. It started years ago, you know. It started when the daycare centres were shut. There's so many things that have been happening, and they've sneaked them in, and they've sneaked them in. We really need to keep an eye on things. You know, we can't be complacent. There's another C. There'll be lots of C's thrown in. We just have to keep an eye on it. You know, one of the other things we're conditioned is to the topsy-turviness, there's a good Scottish word, the topsy-turviness, the topsy-turviness of Trident as a peacekeeper. I mean, come on, you know. And we're conditioned to think that's actually the truth, you know, bullshit. You know, it's just a nonsense, you know. So in 2014, there was that metaphor that was kicking about. My son actually said it, and I said, Brian, that's already been spoken about, as the idea of the union was the abused wife and a bad relationship kind of thing, and that better together thing was rubbish if indeed it wasn't a partnership in the true sense of the word. So I'm excited because that is becoming clearer and clearer, and anyone that talks about we're better together now, I mean, we don't have to look very far to get the facts and the details to let them know that isn't the case at all, you know. So it's this fear of going alone, but that makes people think that we are in a relationship, and that is a condition that we all think it's better to be with somebody than to be single. Now, as a single person, I'm looking. No, basically, you know, it's that there is that. So we have to, like Patrick says, we have to listen up for that fear and not just condemn folk right out, because people think it's about us being isolated and being independent in a kind of, you know, fearful kind of a way. And I'm trying now to just have an ear for that and a listening for that, rather than go, oh, don't be so fucking stupid, you know, which is what I normally do, you know. I'm trying to listen out for that fear, because it is a feeling that folk think that we'll be compensating ourselves and we'll curtail ourselves, and it's better to just stay in this relationship because it's convenient and we don't have to face those fears. Lots of C's there. And so it is for me about that, about now listening. I suspect there's probably folk in the room like me who do remember that you know, we thought of the beloved Labour Party as the way forward for us, and that would be, but I think we now know that we need something more radical. And I think one of the things that we need to accept about ourselves here in this movement, and it is a movement, it is a campaign, and we are foot soldiers, like Patrick said, is it's leading edge. So folk are scared. You know, and when and that leading edge is becoming more and more normal, and so it's so exciting to see that becoming something like, and what Lynn said, I mean, I remember that conversation about, you know, in 2000, you know, that thing of, it was difficult then, you know. It certainly explains why I've not been working, but it is that thing of realising that we now know that devolution was great for Scotland, that independence will be even better. And we know that Scotland's one of the wealthiest nations on the planet. It's a nonsense we can't do it in ourselves. I don't think that independence will be a cure-all, and I think it's the first crucial step. And we know that we need this nation to be a beacon and show the way. I mean, I would take the border right down to Surrey, if I could, you know. I mean, I would invite all the Newcastle, you know. I mean, basically, it's a way of thinking that we're representing here, and it's in Scotland. It really is in Scotland, and that's something that we need to actually be talking about now. And I think most of us do want the same thing. I think we want, you know, our vulnerable adults and our children to be looked after, because nobody survives it if we don't. You know, nobody actually gets away with leaving a whole section, swathe of our society, of our citizenship behind. You know, everybody's going to have to pay for it. Even those dodgy guys that Lynn spoke about who say, you know, if you vote the wrong way, well, I mean, it's really hard to imagine that could go on in this beautiful nation of ours, but I know it does. So when we have our independence, we will have all the powers we need to ensure that Westminster's health privatisation agenda, which is becoming clearer and clearer by the day, can't damage our wonderful NHS. You know, one of the things I say to people is, I'm just against a system that's against the majority. Are you no? I bet you are. I bet if you finished off your thinking, you would realise you are. And if you aren't, then you ought to finish off your thinking and do it quick. A wee brag here. It was very clear in Castlemilk. I was brought up, my mummy had 4 boys, 4 girls and 3 nervous breakdowns. And there was 10 years in that house in Castlemilk with ice on the inside of the windows and all that stuff. Hello, you. So just recognising you now. So it was that upbringing. But I'm going to shut up soon. But it was my brother Peter that made it very clear that we weren't being told our Scottish history and we weren't being given Scottish stories. So he used to take me to the Castlemilk Library and literally point to James Hogg and point to Sir Walter Scott, and he even took me to the City Chambers once and said, "You own that building?" And I was like, "Really?" So it was him. So my brother's now, lots of C's coming up, my brother's now in China. He went for Castle to China. So guess who he met there the other day? So he emailed me a quote. He went for lunch and he emailed me a quote and he said, "The First Minister, ? First off, she's pretty impressive. I'd categorise her adept. She's great with the alibis and the asides and made what was, I say, a pretty standard speech to a room full of businessmen entertaining. If she ever gives up the politics, she's got a career in stand-up comedy waiting. Her style was a kind of John Maloney dryness. He did, of course, go up and introduce himself, which I said to him, you better not, don't you dare. Because he's, at this point, I want you to imagine wearing a bright green Armani suit that his woman, with loads of money bought him. So he would look like a leprechaun because he's wee, Peter. So he'd be like a wee green leprechaun. So he goes up and he says, to her, I'm Libby's brother. For Castle Milk. That's what he says. Hello, Nicola. I'm Libby's brother for Castle Milk. His Scottish accent's got worse. He says, don't worry, I didn't embarrass you, and Nicola didn't embarrass Scotland. So all in a win-win afternoon. So that was nice. So the grassroots movement that we are part of is the way to go, guys. There's things that have been, I talk to young musicians and actors, none of us are working in Scotland, and we're talking about that kind of, I would make a rude sign, but I won't because we're on that thing. They're talking about doing that to the establishment, to the funding sources, to queuing up at Creative Scotland, who are funding God knows who, but no me. And there's a new movement across the arts, which is very much a grassroots movement, and it's indicative of what's happening just now in Scotland. It's everywhere. It's not just us. It's musicians are doing it, poets are doing it. We're basically saying enough already. This isn't working. The National Theatre Scotland auditioned in London up till recently. There's just things that are happening that should never be happening in this beautiful nation of ours, and people like me should be in work. I'm only kidding. It's like Hardeep says, really, you see what's happening at the art school, you see what's happening at the drama school, and you think, where are the platforms for these wonderful, beautiful people coming out, So I'm going to finish, but I'm not going to finish before I sing a song. No, I'm only kidding. I'm not going to sing a song, but I'm going to read a poem, John. And the only reason I'm going to read this poem is to hark back to the idea of we're better together, because what we're talking about here is the reason I'm attracted to this party, the SNP, and to the movement is because it's this mongrel nation that I'm so proud to be a part of, because it goes right back to my mammy's Jock Tamson's bairns, and that's what we're here for. We're here to look after each other. So that's why I want us to be an independent nation, because I think we will do that, and we can do it, and we can be a beacon. So I'm now going to do this is a big cheeky C, 2 C's here, the commercial break. So I'm doing a show at the Edinburgh Festival. Now there's a reason I'm telling you, because it's called In for a Penny, and it's about the time when I was sentenced to 6 weeks in Corton Vale for parking tickets. Is it a true story? You'll have to come and see to find out. But although the play is about that person, it's really tackling the fact that there are so many people in our jails who are in jail for being poor. We're going back to the debtors' prisons. That's the way things are going. I've worked in Corton Vale, I've worked in Lomos, I've worked in lots of different, I went with Spirit Aid into Beaumont Prison. I do a lot of work in prisons, and everything's topsy-turvy. When I'm working with young people, I say to them, psst, have you ever noticed how the grown-ups are making a mess of things? Everything's topsy-turvy in this land. We need to turn it all around. So In for a Penny is on at the Edinburgh Festival, and I do want you to come and see it. And myself and David Cosgrove, who's writing it, who's a Scottish BAFTA winner, we devised it together. He's writing it, I'm in it. It's a one-woman show, and basically we're going to really try and work hand in hand with all the prison authorities and actually just try and create something that's really of today. And I really want you to come and see it. And Women's Hour the other day, there's a woman who was in jail. She had 2 part-time jobs, 2 kids, didn't pay her council tax, and she's in the jail. You know, I don't have any statistics, but I found one that I thought, this is enough to know. 150 inland revenue inspectors are investigating £200 billion in tax evasion, where we have 2,500 debt workers and pension inspectors investigating £2 billion in benefit fraud. So if you don't get that as 2,500 people, 2 billion and 150 people looking at 200 billion. So that's what's going on just now. We really need to get out of here. The other commercial break I'm going to tell you about is the Evening Times column, which I want you to all read on a Wednesday, which is a wee nod to my mammy, who said to me, folk are good, don't let anybody tell you any different, folk are good. So the Evening Times column is a nod to the good times. I wrote in today's about two boys who were fighting like mad to get the mobility scooters in Kelvin Grove Park, fighting, and the line says, but the new administration, and that's basically what happened. They were fighting the Labour Party for years and years, asked to prove a need for folk to be able to go round the park if they couldn't walk, and the new administration got it sorted. So well done, the new administration. So I'm going to read this poem and then I'm going to sit down and the cake can come out. This will be a minute, guys, I'm sorry. The reason I'm reading this poem is because of the grassroots thing that I think that we should just feel the energy of here, because we are the guys, we're the foot soldiers. If I'm not working, it's got to be worth it. It's written by a woman called Kirsten McLean, and she's a young woman, and she's our future. I know this guy. His name's Di. He writes these books and papers and letters. He's always trying to change the world for the better, always talking about what's to be done, about the drones and the bombs and the subs and the guns and the mums. They hear the scream or the bang or the blast or the muted shudder and run out and try to put the pieces of the children back together. Well, Di, this guy I was telling you about, he's been trying to figure it out, because he's no daft, this guy. He reckons we're all pretty much the same, you and I and him, ordinary folk just trying to get by, with absolutely no clue about what we can do to help. I'm looking at you, and maybe it's wrong or presumptuous or rude, but I'm guessing that when you look at the world and you see all this, you want to do some good. It's that time when you sit in the living room at 10 and the sound of the news fills the house about men who've been killed in Syria or Iraq, and you feel a bit numb. So you just turn your back and make a cup of tea, or it's the petition that you've signed on Twitter or Facebook, earnestly hoping that that'll get you off the hook. You've done your bit for the day. Now please, sweet Jesus, just let the guilt go away. Ah, look, there's a post from a pal. He's a bit of a cock. I meant to block him, but he's just put this post about the top 10 most embarrassing photos of celebrities, and I look, and I'm off the hook for now. Well, back to my guy, Di. He's observed this impotent but common ambition for a whole-scale reform of the human condition, and he knows that it's hard to feel that what you're doing now can have any real impact. But he reckons that you and me have infinite power to find a solution, but we've lost all hope for a revolution, because we've actually begun to believe what they tell us, that what matters in life is the war and the strife, and the oil and the austerity and the financial prosperity. And for far too long we've kind of known that's wrong, but I had absolutely no idea what to do. Well, here we are, it's me and you, and our tiny part of this planet, and we can start small. Now here's the rub, for the sake of us all, we could find in ourselves that person we trust, value, adore, honour and love. And so when we stand with complete self-respect and a deep knowledge of our own brilliance, we cannot neglect our brothers and sisters and aunties and wains and colleagues and bosses and folks on the train, and want them to be happy, and want them to be happy. Because each of our lives has equal potential. If we want to be happy, then it's essential that we remember that my dad and your mother, the junkie, the teacher, dictator, that tramp, means as much as each other. Another guy, not Di, said, be the change you want to see. And I know that's true. If me and you know that change we want to see is peace, respect, and the right to be free, then strive with our might to do what is right, just here, where we are, then maybe we can make a difference.
Thank you very much, Libby, and maybe we get a round of applause for everybody at the table. Thanks very much. Okay, so we've got just a brief break. We've maybe run a wee bit over time because Hardeep spoke forever. If you're listening, Hardeep, I'm only joking. If you want to ask a question, come up, take a ticket from the bingo book, and there's no favouritism. We'll maybe get someone to pick the tickets out, and you can ask your question. But meantime, we're going to take a 10-minute break. Tea and coffee up the top left, cakes up the top right, and we'll catch up in 10 minutes. Thank you. Aye, sorry. Did you want number one? You can choose if you want.
I just choose it.
Where is it you live anyway, Sean? Where do you live anyway? Good. Keep in touch. Oh, good. Delighted. I'll make sure you get chosen. I'll make sure you get chosen. That's all right. Take a bit of effort, but apologies for that. Another shout out to the guys who have sat here labouring for hours from Independence Live. So if you please wouldn't mind, give them a shout out. Thanks very much. Okay, this is, I suppose this is quite interesting because we've got a number of people that have taken one of our fabulous bingo tickets, so I'm going to just go in a random. I don't know who's taken which ticket. I'm going to go for a number 2 to start with. No pun intended. So who is number 2?
That's me. I want to ask a question.
Right. Okay, you want to check your pockets. Who's taking the number 2 ticket? We'll have to move on. Number 4 ticket. Oh, wait a minute. We've got somebody with number 2. Just couldn't find it in amongst all that money. Okay, if you can tell us who you want to ask, or if you want to ask the whole panel, we would ask probably if you could keep it brief. Cheers.
I'll keep it brief. Is it all right if I simply make a statement?
Yep.
Yeah? Okay. I'm George MacDonald, and I am looking for a Scottish Socialist Republic. So from there, just very quickly, my life. I joined the Merchant Navy when I was 15. So I did the North Atlantic convoys and stuff like that. I also volunteered for the Japanese situation. From there, I travelled to Africa, all over Africa, north, south, east and west. India, I got a thing about life in India. Calcutta and Bombay and Madras, I saw poor people there. And I mean really poor people. I saw people dying before my eyes. People lying with elephantitis in the pavements of Calcutta, things like that. That's a bit changed now, of course. Onward to the Japanese situation. I got there 2 weeks prior to the end of it. And so what I saw there in Malaysia, etc., was really astonishing. Absolutely astonishing. I'll finish on the one that says, very quickly, my life travelled on at one point. Robert Burns. Robert Burns, I visited the Soviet Union as it was then. I was before the great betrayal of 1991. Burns. There was 2 words I learned from visiting the Soviet Union, including a visit to Siberia. The 2 words I learned was mir and druzhba. I take it everybody knows a bit of Russian, so you know what that is, okay? For anyone who doesn't know, mir is peace and druzhba is friendship. I'll end with that. The Soviet Union is no more. It's now a capitalist country after a great betrayal, because people like Murphy and the other 2 that we know in Scotland, the equivalent of these people are out there everywhere as well, including in the Soviet Union. That's what brought it down. Anyway, I'll finish on the note that the miracle that I saw in the Soviet Union was real. As a socialist country, it transformed the world. You all know what I'm talking about. Only the Soviet Union could have sorted out the Nazi fascist hordes from there, and it cost them about 25 million people lost in that war. But from there, of course, best summed up the socialist Soviet Union from wooden ploughs to spaceships. That's what can happen when we take the socialist path. I'll finish on that note.
Thank you, George. Thank you. Patrick's just going to reply to that because Patrick's got a quite obvious connection to Russia.
Yeah, I've been to Moscow quite a few times. My wife's Russian. And the thing I think the people here in Scotland and the rest of the United Kingdom don't realise is the Wales are almost upon us. I think the people don't realise the tremendous fear that the Russian people have of the West. There is a concerted fear among Russian people that the Western governments are trying to impose their version of democracy onto the people of Russia. Almost on a nightly basis, my mother-in-law phones and talks about how scared she is of the West. And that narrative is never ever heard in the UK or in America. So I always like to get that in when I get a chance. I've been to Moscow quite a few times. Wonderful, wonderful people. They have more burnt suppers in Moscow in January than we have in the whole of Scotland. We share a patron saint. The Russian Football Federation was started by a Scotsman. We've got tremendous bonds by the Russian people. But once again, politicians cause conflict and fear, not ordinary people.
Okay, I'm just going to go for a random selection here. So I'm going to go for number 5. Aim to get ticket number 5.
Somebody's got 4 because they stood up.
There you go. Go for it.
5.
We'll get number 4 straight after it. Apologies.
What if Scotland loses its majority of pro-independence politicians at Holyrood, or if Theresa May says no to a second referendum? What then for the independence movement?
Okay, I'm not sure who wants to answer that. I'm happy for anybody to answer that.
I'm ready.
I sincerely hope there's a because we should be in a situation where we do have a parliament, and the people in charge of that parliament. Is that one?
I don't know if it's working. Let's see again.
I can't believe that I hope sincerely there is a plan B, because I feel that okay, when we hit the referendum the last time, we came really from behind to get to where we got to. The polls really were talking about 50-50 here, if not more. So once this goes, we are working from a real position of strength. We've heard all the lies before. They can't use the same lies. But they can try and prevent us from having a referendum. And I think we should all be very, very concerned about this attack on Holyrood, without a doubt. This continuity bill, just coming over in the car there, John and I were talking about this. David Mundell said the reason that they were taking that to court, the Westminster government were taking it to court, is because our presiding officer said that he didn't think that we had the competence to pass that bill. But of course what he never said in the same voice was that, in fact, in Wales, the presiding officer agreed that they had the competence. So how can we have Wales, which has got far less devolution than we have, and somehow they have the competence, their presiding officer believes they have the competence to pass that bill, but Scotland, with a far deeper devolution, has not. It just doesn't make sense. I think we have a hard fight ahead of us. If we leave Europe, they cannot let Scotland go. It's an even bigger issue than it was before, in my opinion. What are they going to do without all Scotland's resources? I mean, I don't know if you saw, there was a tweet recently about the Pentland Firth electricity. It's just coming online now. If you've ever crossed to Orkney, you know why electricity is made from the Pentland Firth. So we have a big fight ahead, and if they say no, let's hope our government has another way of getting us that referendum.
Thanks very much, Lynn. I think Patrick wanted to make a...
I think I'll answer your question, but I won't answer your question because, to be honest, I'm a bit of a Puritan about this. I'm sick and tired of politicians telling us when we will make that decision about having a free Scotland. Ever since the last referendum, we've had Ruthless Ruth and our cronies telling us shut up, shut up, shut up. I'm sure there's people in here tonight who are Indy supporters who have spent 40 years being told to get back in your box and be quiet, and they've carried on that fight. I think we have to make it inevitable that there is a referendum and that the result is yes. I think it's extremely foolish to trust politicians of any political party deliver independence for us. I think the only thing that will deliver that is the will of the people. Yep. And I don't think the establishment in any country wants independence, especially here in the UK. But I do believe we shouldn't trust politicians. It's incumbent on each and every one of us, every day in every way, to push the case for independence and put pressure on politicians to deliver what we, the people of Scotland, want, not an agenda that suits them and a timetable that suits them. It's up to us to force the issue.
We've got two final questions. Just before we go on, there's a comment that Ruth Davidson made, which people in politics make comments and maybe later regret them. And one of them was from Ruth Davidson in September 2012. Her comment was, "I believe Scotland is big enough, rich enough and good enough to be an independent country." And some of these politicians, you might want to research what they've actually said some years ago, and it's worthwhile bringing them to account. So we've got two final questions. Number 2, I think. Number 4, my apologies. Go for it.
Dougie Malloy. What I want to ask, first of all, let me say I really enjoyed the shared vision that everybody in here's got. Right? I really enjoyed the shared vision that everybody in here had. But I really do think I've got to ask the question of the recent past and tie it in with a wee bit of history. What lessons did we learn from what happened in Catalan? That's the biggie, when you actually look at what's actually happening there. And the other devastating thing to me in the democratic deficit, so-called, is the attitude or the lack of attitude or resolution that the European Union took in relation to that. Yep. And the last footnote I've got to say to you when we talk about independence is very important, but we've got to remember who we're dealing with here. We've got the most brutal, how can I say to you, no, it's got to be called the ruling class that ever has been. You've only got to look at the history of the British Empire. So if we look at that, Catalan, European Union, and who we're really dealing with here, and got to develop a hard edge for that. Thank you.
What a fantastic, lead on there from question number 5, because it is going to be hard. I mean, I agree with Patrick that it's that kind of grassroots movement that I was talking about, but take a hard line. What does a hard line look like on a Monday morning or a Tuesday afternoon? When you're going, meet my pal for a coffee. But I think it's so great that these questions are in the room, because I think that it would be easy to turn on the news and see what's happening to the Catalan ministers and just despair. Just kind of think, oh my God, look at what Spain's doing, and for it to put the fear of God in us, But I think the thing to do, and what's wonderful about these questions, is to just keep everything up in the air and keep talking, so that the communication is always in the street and always real and always alive, so that we can actually start building it. Like Lynn said, God hope there is actually a plan B that we can get behind, would be my preferred situation, but so that we can sort of say, right, look, and it is interesting, Lynn, you can look at it two ways. You can sort of say that Brexit's brought up this situation where we have leverage, where we're going, there's a chink in there, we can get in here and go, no, this is not what we voted for. But at the same time, I remember my sister who married a Malteser, and she's been in Malta for 40 odd years, and she just said to me, they will not let it happen. And I said, what are you talking about? They will not let... Who are the they? She said, Libby, I'm telling you now, they will not let it happen. And Mary and I kind of fought about it that night. I was going, that's a really despondent, really kind of... So I suppose, what I'm trying to say is, let's look at each other, let's talk to each other, let's, keep each other buoyant. And I think it is that buoyancy that we need to say, we don't know what it looks like, this taking a hard line. We're not there yet. Let's not get worried and anxious and upset, but let's keep finding out what's going on, Also, I think that if you remember how bad it felt on the day after, that's not the place to go to, and it's often the place I go to. I want to go back to the way how good it felt watching that momentum rise, it was so brilliant. It was so exciting. So just picking up that energy and staying together and finding out, you know, finding out what's going on, but at the same time, I think we need each other to keep each other buoyant, you know.
I think for me, the things I take out of what happened in Catalonia and with the European Union is twofold. It's firstly the fact that we constantly need to remember that we're being fed information and news that's not true and is extremely selected. And the second thing for me is the will of the people of Catalonia, because although we are not seeing it and it's not there every day in our television screens, there are still hundreds of thousands of people every day taking part in peaceful protests, fighting for democracy and the spirit of freedom and the spirit of independence. And eventually that will take its toll in a capitalist system that's built on very, very, very soft foundations. And we're at the situation where the people demand independence and we refuse it. We've got a long history going back to people like Jimmy Reid and McLean and all these people.
Mary Barber.
Mary Barber. There's all these people that have shown the people of Scotland that not only do we want to be a beacon throughout the world, we want to be a beacon in Britain and say we deserve independence and we're going to keep fighting until we get it. And it's everybody in this room's responsibility to go out and kick arse and make sure people are on our side in this.
I think we've probably got time for one more. Yep, one more question, is that okay? On you go.
Yeah. The question is basically Sean Clerkin. Yeah, Sean Clerkin. What I'm saying is that when we started out in the referendum campaign the last time round, when Alex Salmond was leading it as our First Minister, we started out with 23% support and we ended up with 45%. Now we're at a stage now where we're in the mid-40s or the late 40s, 45 to 47% realistically. We've only got to get that 2 to 3% to over the winning line. So I would be saying that the question I'm really asking here is, what do the panel think that, you know, basically that we've only got a limited window of opportunity because the SNP have got a triple mandate, and the fact is that so many of their MPs and MSPs, some of them tend to be careerists, collecting their salaries, they're part of the system. It's up to the Yes movement from below to push up the way, because we've only got a short road to go to get Scottish independence, but we've only got a limited window of opportunity. It's got to happen within the next 12 months. We've got to have that second referendum, because if we go beyond that, we're going to lose that window of opportunity for many, many years to come. And I'd like to know what you think about that.
When you said that there, we had a meeting of the programming committee of Bloody Scotland a couple of days ago, and somebody said, you do realise this is going to be the last Bloody Scotland before Brexit. That was one scary thing that was said. Now, you remember the day after we voted no, and we were going to be, you know, don't leave us, lead us. And the Prime Minister stood outside Downing Street and basically took away some of the rights of Scottish MPs with the English vote down there. Let me ask you, what do you think is going to happen if we vote no again? What will be the first thing that is said on the doorstep of Downing Street? Yeah, Parliament will close. Now, I can remember going past that vigil up in the Mound, and you know, the people who manned that, there were loads of them, but there was always only 2 or 3 at a time, and the cars hooted. What a long wait we had the last time. We can't get it wrong again, right? And I agree, we have a window of opportunity. We'll have to mobilise enough to... We can stand up and say we want it, but at the end of the day, they've got to find a way of giving it to us.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cheers. I think that's a great question. I don't want to offend anyone in the room by stating how I feel about things. I honestly believe my desire for independence is stronger than the First Minister's. I remember during the referendum campaign, we had one of our famous meetings in Airdrie Shotts, and we were told, get out there and board up your windows because the establishment are going to try and stop us. And one of the members says, hold on a minute, we are now the establishment. And that is the case, we are now the establishment. We have government ministers sitting in great jobs and great positions. We've got Butte House occupied by the SNP. And I believe that their choosing of the timing of when to go for independence will be more about protecting their position than delivering for the people of Scotland. But I speak as an individual on that. It's up to you as a collective of the people of Scotland, in my view, to tell Nicola Sturgeon or any other politician, this is now the time when we want to vote on our future. We really need to get away from this trust Nicola nonsense. I don't trust any politician. I've been in enough company with enough of them to know that they're like the rest of us. They're fallible, they're human, they've got mortgages, they've got families to provide for, and there's always a little bit of self-interest there. The interest of Scotland and the people living in poverty, for me, overrides all of that. But it's got to be a decision by the people of Scotland to show their will for independence, that dictates the time of when we actually go for independence again. And if we don't get independence this time, I'll do what all the CND people do. I'll keep on campaigning for it, because it's the right thing to do, it's the only thing to do, no matter how long it goes on. We all need to keep that fight going.
Again, Sean, the right question to ask and the right time to ask it, you know. I think we're all understanding across the board that the way that things are going in the best way that they ought to go is not top down, but you know whether it be factory workers deciding how to fix problems in the factory floor. It used to be the high Hegians, that would go do it this way. Now we know basically that the folk that are at the basically the front line are the ones that know the best. So Scotland not being independent is affecting where our Wains go to school and what education they're getting, and so we're right at the edge of whether it matters or not. I think for me, people need platforms, and one of the great things about what happened in 2014 was I heard from teachers that all these kids started to take modern studies as a subject, and that was exciting to hear kids actually naturally politicising themselves, and I think that's been a big shift. So for me, I'm going to start listening up to the young people about the platforms that they're using, because one of the things that I've got this big thing, I want folk to come back to the theatre, that's one of my aims and objectives, get back to it. But it was a young person that said, you should go through social media to get them to go back to the theatre. I want them away from the screens, away from the telly, and they were going, no, you need to go through the screens to get, So it's like, people need platforms, so I suppose what we need to do is we need to be really inventive around how often and how loud our voice can be heard. And I think Patrick's right. I think more pressure on politicians is something we should all be feeling responsible around,
So I think we're wrapping up now, folks. So there's two things I want to say. First of all, thank you very much to everybody. It's been fantastic. Thank you for turning up. And the second final thing is, on your way out the door, there's two small bits of donation that would be, I don't know, worthwhile. One is the green bin right on the corner of that table, and the other one is up the back left. If you want any Yes memorabilia, we've got some fantastic stuff available up the top left. Some of it's just been wrapped up, but some might be still available. So the final word is, thank you very much. Thanks for turning up.
One day we'll share a sense where we get
Okay, so righty. No, we can hear it. We're live. Okay, folks, I hope you enjoyed that from East Kilbride. What do you think, Geordie?
Yeah, really good.
Yeah. What do we have coming up next?
Well, I don't know what you can say before it. St George's Day.
That's right.
23rd of.
Right.
Well, as the St George's Day is the 23rd of St George's Day is the 23rd of September. Right. But the Catalans are going to go to Parliament.
Right.
I think it's the 21st. I'm not sure which day that is.
Okay.
I think it's a Monday.
Yeah. Oh, well, and the one that I'm really looking forward to is a big march, May the 5th, Glasgow.
All under one banner.
Yeah. So, folks, if you can, get yourself along to Glasgow on May the 5th, and I'll get the graphic up. Okay, get along to Glasgow on May the 5th. As you can see, there's also marches in Dumfries, 2nd of June, Bannockburn, 23rd of June, and Inverness on the 28th. And we've got David here. Hi, David. Did you enjoy the live stream tonight? Yeah. All right. Okay. Do you know what we have coming up next?
Big night in.
Big night in.
Is next Thursday.
Next Thursday.
I'm going to announce the proper lineup because I was speaking to Rob about it today. It's going to be quite a good tune.
Okay.
We're going to have a studio full of people, but we're still looking for more people to come be in the audience.
Yeah.
We're live now, are we?
Yeah, we're live.
Cool. So anybody who wants to come and be in the audience and take part and have crisps and stuff like that, so it should be good fun. But the whole idea of the big night in is it's not just us being presenters, it's everybody taking part in the show. That's how it's meant to be. So we need you to come and help make it like that, so we don't have a manual again, just like 4 guys getting criticised.
Yeah.
It's the last Thursday of every month,
yeah.
So it's Thursday coming.
Yeah, we got caught out the last time because
it's 8 o'clock as well.
We had 2 carloads of people coming, but we couldn't make it.
And then the cars disappeared in fog.
Yeah.
They never made it to the studio.
So we had one brave soul came along.
She
did a great job.
A week on Thursday.
So if you want to,
tomorrow.
So if you want to join the audience, get in touch with us. Yeah, go to our website, contact form.
St George's Day is the 23rd.
Okay, yes, after the 23rd.
But the Catalans are going to go to the Parliament on the 21st. The Scottish Parliament to celebrate St George's Day.
That's excellent, okay.
I think it's the 21st, I think it's the Monday.
We're Thursday the 26th.
So that's the 23rd, they're doing it the 23rd.
Monday, right. So Thursday 26th, big night in.
Okay, well you're glad to know I didn't have the front mic on, but it is now, so it just picked up a little bit. So,
in fact, I think the Catalans are going to the Parliament on a Saturday. This is 21st.
No one. So I'll just repeat that in case you completely missed it. Well, David enjoyed it.
Right, so the next Thursday, the 26th, it's the big night in. We're on every month. It's the last Thursday of the month. So this month it's the 26th. I was speaking to Rob about it today. We've got a plan in place. We're going to announce the details in the next couple of days. I can't tell you exactly what, but we're going to have a studio full of people, and we also want you guys to also come and be in that studio as well. Because the more audience members we've got, the more interaction there is, the better show it is.
Yeah, and it's down in Tradeston in Glasgow.
It's Tradeston in Glasgow. It's not far from Central Station if you're coming in from outside. We can always help you a wee bit with a lift or something if you're nearby, I don't know. But right, we're going to be crisps and a few munchies and maybe even go for a wee drink afterwards. Just come down and have a bit of fun, because politics is boring. Entertainment and fun is a great gateway for getting people into serious issues. We need to try and nurture that.
Excellent. So we're going to shoot a little video next, aren't we? Then we're going to get all the stuff down. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 cameras here, and Zoom. We've got cable. We've got an internet. Oh, that was a good story, wasn't it? We've got our Wi-Fi gizmo outside the building, and somebody tried to steal it earlier.
Try to steal the internet for Independence Live.
Some kids tried to steal it. And
how unpopular would you be if you were the guy that nicked the internet?
I know, it was shocking. It was shocking. But there you go. You know, it's all fun. Anyway, folks, tune in to us again. Follow us on social media: Facebook, YouTube, our website, independencelive.net, Twitter. Have I missed anything? I think that's it.
That's us. That's us.
All right, folks. Peace and love from East Kilbride.
Peace.